I should have known everything would explode when my father's jaw clenched at the sight of the toy robot. It was Tuesday at Whole Foods. I was 30, pushing a cart with my 5-year-old son Leo, clutching a $35 robot kit. My parents walked behind us another family bonding day that was really just supervision. Leo's eyes sparkled. "Mommy, can we really get it?" I had $47 left from my monthly allowance, the price of living in their house. The robot cost $35. But the joy on Leo's face made the decision easy. "Yes, baby." His gasp of delight made other shoppers smile. For 90 seconds, I felt like a good mother. Then we reached checkout. My father's hand clamped my wrist as I reached for the card reader joint account, his name, his control. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Before I could answer, he tore my wallet in half. The card snapped. Cash scattered. "You don't have the right to spend a single cent." But my mother's hand cracked across my face. "You're pathetic, Amelia." My father shoved me into a pasta display. Glass shattered. My knee cracked against metal, blood soaking through my jeans. "Get up, and if you try this again, I'll report you for theft." Around us, people filmed. The cashier backed away. But Leo's face broke me, tears streaming, still clutching that robot box, his eyes empty and resigned. Something inside me snapped. I stood, placed 2 20s on the counter for the robot, and broken jars, took Leo's hand and walked out. That's when I remembered Chloe Martinez. 3 weeks ago, I'd been awake at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep after another argument with my parents. This time, it had been about Leo's education. They wanted to enroll him in an expensive private school, which on the surface sounded generous, except that it came with the expectation that I would volunteer there extensively, essentially providing them with unpaid labor and social currency. When I'd suggested that Leo was happy at his current school and that I might look for a job instead, my father had laughed, actually laughed. "Who's going to hire you?" he'd asked. "You have no skills, no recent work experience, and a kid to take care of. You'd be lucky to get minimum wage, and that wouldn't even cover childcare. You need us, Amelia. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be." That night, lying in bed in their guest room, because of course, I didn't even have my own room in their house anymore, I'd pulled out my phone and searched for family law attorney financial abuse. I'd scrolled through dozens of websites, feeling more hopeless with each one. Most attorneys wanted retainers of several $1,000s, money I obviously didn't have. But then I'd found Chloe's website. She was younger than most of the other attorneys, probably mid-30s, based on her photo. Her practice focused specifically on domestic violence and family law, with an emphasis on helping people escape controlling relationships. What had caught my attention was a section of her website titled, "If You Can't Afford an Attorney." Instead of just listing payment plans or pro bono options, she'd written a detailed guide on resources available, how to document abuse, what to do in an emergency, and she'd provided her personal cell phone number with a note. "If you're in crisis and don't know where to turn, call me, day or night. The consultation is free, and we'll figure out the rest together." I'd called her the next day from a library, afraid my parents would see the number on our shared phone plan. She'd answered on the third ring, her voice warm and professional. "Chloe Martinez. Hi, I saw your website, and I don't know if you can help me, but I think I'm in a bad situation and I don't know what to do about it." "Tell me what's going on," she'd said simply, no judgment, no pressure. I'd told her everything, about moving in with my parents after Leo's father left, about how the temporary help had become permanent control, about the joint bank account and the monitored phone and the constant criticism disguised as concern, about how I felt trapped but guilty for feeling trapped, because wasn't I lucky to have parents who helped me? Wasn't I being ungrateful? Chloe had listened to everything without interrupting, and when I finished, she'd been quiet for a moment before speaking. "Amelia, what you're describing is financial abuse and emotional manipulation. It qualifies as domestic violence even though the abusers are your parents. You're not being ungrateful, you're being controlled, and that's not the same thing as being helped." Those words had hit me like a physical force. Someone was naming what I'd experienced, validating it, treating it as serious and real. I'd started crying right there in the library, trying to be quiet, overwhelmed by the relief of being believed. "I'm going to give you my personal cell number," Chloe had continued. "When you're ready to make a change, call me. Day or night, it doesn't matter. We'll figure out a plan together. You don't have to stay in this situation, Amelia. You have options." At the time, I hadn't been ready. The fear was too great, the unknowns too vast. I'd thanked her, hung up, and returned to my parents' house to my carefully controlled existence. But I'd saved her number. Somewhere deep inside, I'd known I might need it someday. Now sitting in this gas station parking lot with nowhere else to turn, I powered my phone back on, just long enough to pull up her number. My hands were shaking so badly I almost couldn't dial. It was 7:30 on a Tuesday evening. She probably wouldn't answer. She probably didn't really mean that day or night thing. It was just something lawyers said to sound compassionate. But I called anyway because what other choice did I have? The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when I heard her voice. Chloe Martinez. Hi, this is Amelia Reed. I called you a few weeks ago about… I remember you, Amelia. Her voice was warm, immediate, concerned. Are you safe? That question, asked with such genuine care, made my throat tighten with emotion. I finally left. I'm at a gas station with my son and I don't know what to do. I'm sorry for calling so late. Don't apologize. You did exactly the right thing by calling me. Where's the gas station? I gave her the address, reading it off the sign, and I heard her typing in the background. Okay, I know where that is. I'm going to come to you. It's going to take me about 20 minutes. Can you stay there safely until I arrive? Yes, I think so. Good. If your parents show up before I get there, I want you to go inside the store and tell the clerk you need help. Tell them you're waiting for your attorney and you're afraid of your parents. Do you understand? Yes. Amelia, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What you did today took incredible courage. You took the first and hardest step. Everything from here, we're going to figure out together. You're not alone anymore. Do you believe me? I wanted to believe her. More than anything, I wanted to believe that this nightmare could have a way out, that someone could actually help me. But I'd spent so many years being disappointed, being let down, being told I was the problem, that trust felt impossible. I'm trying to, I said honestly. That's good enough for now. I'll be there soon. Stay safe. After she hung up, I sat there staring at my phone. Leo leaned forward from his car seat and patted my shoulder with his small hand. Mommy, who was that? That was a friend who's going to help us, baby. Is she nice? I think so, I hope so. I hope so too, Leo said seriously. Then, with the ability of children to find joy, even in chaos, he held up his robot box. Can we build this when we get to our new home? Yes, baby, we'll build it together, I promise. Okay, good. I want to make it into a dinosaur first. The box says it can be a T-Rex. I smiled despite everything, despite the pain in my knee and the fear in my chest, and the complete uncertainty of our future. A T-Rex sounds perfect. Chloe arrived in 18 minutes, pulling up in a dark blue Honda Accord that was practical and unremarkable, exactly the kind of car you'd expect a hard-working attorney to drive. She was shorter than I'd imagined, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and wearing jeans and a blazer, like she'd been dressed casually at home when I called, but had thrown on something more professional before rushing out. She walked to my car with confident strides and tapped gently on the passenger window. I unlocked the doors, and she slid in, bringing with her a calm, competent energy that made me feel slightly less like I was drowning. Amelia, she said, turning to face me fully. First things first. Are you physically okay? Do you need medical attention? My knee is cut pretty badly, but I don't think it needs stitches. It's already stopped bleeding. Let me see. I rolled up my blood-stained jeans, revealing the gash on my knee. It was about 2 inches long and had already started to bruise around the edges. Chloe pulled out her phone and took several pictures from different angles. I'm documenting this, she explained. We're going to document everything from today, every injury, every witness, every detail you can remember. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case will be. Case for what? For a protective order to start. Based on what happened today, we have grounds for a temporary protective order that will legally prohibit your parents from contacting you or Leo. But I need to know everything. Tell me exactly what happened, start to finish, and don't leave anything out. So I told her. About the robot, about my father's grip on my wrist, about the torn wallet, and my mother's slap and the shove that sent me into the shelves. About the threats to call the police for theft. About the key I'd thrown and the window I'd cracked. About every humiliating, violent second of it. Chloe took notes on her phone, asking clarifying questions, making sure she had every detail correct. Then she turned around to look at Leo, who was watching us with wide, curious eyes. Hi, Leo. I'm Chloe. I'm a lawyer, which means I'm someone who helps people when they have problems. Your mom called me because she needs some help right now. How are you doing? Leo considered this seriously. I'm okay. My mommy got hurt, but she's brave. She bought me my robot anyway. She is very brave, Chloe agreed. Then to me, did your parents hurt Leo directly? Did they touch him or threaten him? No, they just yelled and he saw everything. That's still trauma, and it matters. Leo is a witness to domestic violence, which strengthens our case. She pulled a bottle of water and a granola bar from her bag and handed them to me. Drink this, eat this. You're probably in shock and you need to keep your strength up. Then we need to make some decisions about tonight and tomorrow. I drank the water gratefully, realizing I was incredibly thirsty. The granola bar was harder to get down my stomach, churning with anxiety, but I managed half of it. What kind of decisions? I asked. Where you're going to sleep tonight for starters? Do you have friends or family you can stay with? Anyone who isn't connected to your parents? I thought about that question and felt the weight of my isolation crush down on me. Not really. I had friends in college, but I lost touch with most of them over the years. My parents didn't like them, and eventually it was just easier to not see them than to deal with the questions and criticism. There's Sarah, but she moved to Seattle 3 years ago, and my ex-husband's family, but I haven't spoken to them since he left. What about coworkers or neighbors? I haven't had a job in 5 years, and we lived in my parents' neighborhood where everyone was their friend first. I don't have anyone. I expected Chloe to look discouraged by this, but instead she just nodded like this was exactly what she'd expected to hear. That's actually very common in these situations. Isolation is a control tactic. They cut you off from support systems, so you have nowhere to go, no one to turn to. But that's okay. We have options. She pulled out a small notebook and started writing. There's a women's shelter about 15 minutes from here. It's specifically for people escaping domestic violence, and they're used to situations exactly like yours. They have beds available, they provide meals, and they have childcare during the day, so you can look for work. It's free for the first 30 days, which gives us time to get you stabilized. A shelter, I repeated, and I could hear the shame in my own voice. How had I ended up here? A 30-year-old woman with a college degree living in a shelter because she couldn't take care of herself or her child. Chloe must have heard it too because she reached over and squeezed my hand firmly. Amelia, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Going to a shelter is not a failure. It's not shameful. It's a strategic choice that gives you safety and resources while you rebuild. Some of the strongest, most successful women I know have stayed in shelters at various points in their lives. It's a tool, not a judgment. Okay, I said, not entirely convinced, but willing to trust her for now. Good. I'm going to call the shelter and let them know you're coming. Then tomorrow morning, first thing, we're going to the courthouse to file for a temporary protective order. After that, we're going to start building the foundation for your independence. Job hunting, benefit applications, everything you need to establish yourself as a separate entity from your parents. This is going to be hard, Amelia. I won't lie to you. The next few months are going to be some of the most challenging of your life. But you can do this. More importantly, you have to do this for Leo's sake, as much as your own. She made the call to the shelter while I sat there trying to process everything. In the span of 4 hours, my entire life had exploded and reformed into something I didn't recognize. This morning, I'd woken up in my parents' house, following their rules, living their version of my life. Now I was about to sleep in a homeless shelter, officially separating myself from the only family I'd ever known. It should have terrified me more than it did. Instead, underneath the fear and uncertainty, I felt something else, something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I was finally taking control of my own life. Chloe finished her call and gave me an address. They're expecting you. Ask for Diane at the front desk. She's the night manager and she's wonderful. She'll get you and Leo set up in a room, show you around, and explain how everything works. Do you need me to follow you there to make sure you arrive safely? No, I think I can find it. Okay, but Amelia, one more thing before you go. Your parents are going to retaliate. Tomorrow, the next day, soon, they're going to do something to try to regain control. It might be legal action, it might be a social media campaign, it might be showing up at places they think you'll be. Whatever it is, do not respond directly. Do not engage with them. Call me immediately and we'll handle it together. Can you promise me that? I promise. Good. She handed me a business card with her cell number written on the back in pen. This is my direct line. Program it into your phone right now before you forget. I did, hands still shaking slightly as I typed. Then Chloe got out of my car and leaned back in through the window. You did something incredibly brave today, Amelia. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not your parents, not your sister, not that voice in your head that's been trained to tell you you're wrong. You protected yourself and your son. That's what good mothers do. Then she was gone, driving away in her practical Honda, and I was alone with Leo and a future I couldn't even begin to imagine. The shelter was located in a converted school building, 3 stories of brick and large windows that looked simultaneously institutional and welcoming. I parked in the small lot and sat there for a moment, gathering my courage. Through the lit windows, I could see women moving around inside, going about their evening routines. Women who, like me, had reached their breaking points and chosen survival over submission. "Is this our new home?" Leo asked from the back seat. "For now, baby. Just for a little while until we figure things out." "It looks nice. Can I bring my robot?" "Of course you can." We walked to the front entrance together, Leo clutching his robot box and me carrying our entire lives in my purse, because we literally had nothing else. I'd left everything at my parents' house. Clothes, photo albums, Leo's other toys, the few possessions I'd managed to accumulate despite their control. All of it was gone now, inaccessible, probably already thrown away or burned in my father's rage. The woman at the front desk looked up as we entered and smiled warmly. She was in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You must be Amelia and Leo. I'm Diane. Chloe just called me. Welcome." "Welcome." As if we were arriving at a hotel, not a homeless shelter, because I'd finally found the courage to leave an abusive situation. But there was no judgment in her voice, no pity, just genuine warmth and acceptance. She led us through the building, explaining the rules and routines as we walked. Breakfast was served from 6 to 8, dinner from 5 to 7. There was a common room with a TV and books, a playroom for children, a computer lab for job searching and resume building, mandatory house meetings twice a week, chores rotated among residents, no drugs, no alcohol, no weapons, a 11 p.m. curfew for safety. Our room was on the second floor, small but clean. 2 twin beds with fresh white sheets, a dresser, a small table with 2 chairs, a window that looked out onto a quiet street. It was sparse and institutional, but it was ours. No one was going to burst in and criticize how I arranged things. No one was going to inspect and judge and control. "There are toiletries in the bathroom down the hall," Diane explained. "Shampoo, soap, toothbrushes, everything you need. If you need clothes, we have a donation closet that you can access tomorrow. For tonight, just get some rest. You've had a hard day." After she left, I helped Leo change into his pajamas, which were the same clothes he'd been wearing because we didn't have anything else. We'd figure that out tomorrow. Everything could be figured out tomorrow. Tonight, we just needed to survive. "Can we build the robot now?" Leo asked, sitting on his bed with the box in his lap. "It's pretty late, baby. How about we start it tomorrow?" "Okay." He looked around the room, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. "Mommy or Grandpa and Grandma going to come here?" The question I'd been dreading. "No, baby. They don't know where we are, and even if they did, there are rules here that keep people safe. No one can come here unless they're invited, and we're not inviting them." "Good," he said with such conviction that it broke my heart. "I don't want them to come. Grandpa scares me when he yells." I pulled him close, this beautiful boy who had witnessed too much, learned too much too soon about how cruel people could be. "He scared me too, baby. That's why we left. We're going to find a place where no one scares us, where we feel safe all the time. It might take a while, but we're going to do it together. You and me, okay?" "Okay, Mommy, you and me." That night, I lay awake in my narrow bed, listening to Leo's quiet breathing from across the room and staring at the ceiling. My phone, still powered off, sat on the table like a ticking bomb. I knew that when I turned it on tomorrow, there would be hundreds of messages, voicemails, threats, pleas, manipulations. My parents would be orchestrating a campaign to bring me back under their control, and I had no idea how I was going to resist it. But as I lay there in that shelter room in a building full of women who had made similar impossible choices, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not yet. Not confidence or certainty, but possibility. The faint, fragile sense that maybe, just maybe, I could actually build a life that was mine. The next morning came too quickly and not quickly enough. I'd finally fallen asleep around 3 a.m., exhausted from adrenaline and emotion, only to be woken by Diane's gentle knock at 7. "Amelia, Chloe's here to pick you up. Courthouse opens at 8. Right, the protective order, the legal beginning of my separation from my parents. I got up and dressed in yesterday's clothes, now wrinkled and stained with blood on the jeans. My knee throbbed where I'd hit the shelf, a constant reminder of what I'd escaped and why I couldn't go back. Leo was still sleeping, curled up around his robot box like a teddy bear. Diane assured me she'd watch him personally, take him to the playroom when he woke up, make sure he got breakfast. I kissed his forehead, whispered that I'd be back soon, and followed Chloe out to her car. "How did you sleep?" Chloe asked as we drove. "Not well, but I slept. That's something." "It is, and today is going to be hard, but it's necessary." The judge will review our petition for a temporary protective order, and your parents' attorney will likely be there to oppose it. You might have to see them. Can you handle that? Could I thought about my father's face, purple with rage, my mother's cold, calculating cruelty, and I felt my resolve waver. But then I thought about Leo asking if his grandfather was going to come to the shelter, the fear in his small voice, and my resolve hardened into something unbreakable. I can handle it. The courthouse was exactly as imposing and intimidating as I'd expected, all marble and high ceilings, and people who looked like they knew exactly where they were supposed to be and what they were supposed to do. I felt completely out of place in my stained jeans and yesterday's shirt, but Chloe walked with such confidence that I tried to mirror her energy. We went through security, rode the elevator to the third floor, and entered a courtroom that smelled like old wood and stress. And there, sitting in the front row with an attorney in an expensive suit, were my parents. My father had aged years in the single day since I'd last seen him. His face was drawn, his expensive suit somehow looking less impressive in the harsh fluorescent lighting. My mother sat rigidly beside him, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval, her posture radiating wounded dignity. When they saw me walk in with Chloe, their expressions shifted through a rapid sequence of emotions: surprise, anger, disdain, and finally something that might have been concern if I didn't know better. Chloe placed a hand on my arm, guiding me to seats on the opposite side of the courtroom. Don't look at them, don't engage, let me handle everything. Call. The hearing was surreal. The judge, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and sharp eyes, reviewed the petition Chloe had filed that morning. Then my parents' attorney, a man named Gregory Thornton, who had the kind of smooth confidence that came from years of winning, stood up to present their side of the story. Your Honor, my clients are devastated by these allegations. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling are upstanding members of the community who have done nothing but support their daughter and grandson for the past 5 years. Yes, there was an unfortunate incident at a grocery store yesterday, but it was Ms. Reed who became violent, destroying property and verbally threatening her elderly parents in front of multiple witnesses. My clients are actually here today considering their own protective order against their daughter as they fear for their safety. The audacity of it took my breath away. Elderly parents. As if my father wasn't a 6-foot-tall man who had shoved me into a shelf hard enough to draw blood. As if my mother hadn't slapped me with practiced precision. They were playing the victim card, and watching them do it made me understand just how skilled they were at manipulation. But then Chloe stood up, and her voice was calm, clear, and devastating in its factual precision. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence. She approached the bench with her tablet, showing the judge the photos she'd taken of my injuries the night before. These are photographs of Miss Reed's injuries sustained during yesterday's incident. You can see the 2-inch laceration on her knee, the bruising around it consistent with impact trauma. And if you look at the second photo, there are clear finger-shaped bruises on her wrist from where her father grabbed her. She continued, pulling up documents on her tablet. I'd also like to submit the police report from the incident, which includes witness statements from 4 different shoppers and the store cashier. All of them corroborate Ms. Reed's version of events, that her father destroyed her property, her mother struck her, and her father physically pushed her into store fixtures. None of them describe Ms. Reed as being violent or aggressive. In fact, one witness, a retired teacher named Margaret Chen, specifically noted that Ms. Reed appeared to be trying to protect her son from the confrontation. My parents' attorney tried to interrupt, but the judge held up her hand. I'm not finished reviewing the evidence. Continue, Ms. Martinez. Additionally, Your Honor, I'd like to submit a sworn statement from Ms. Reed detailing a pattern of financial abuse and emotional manipulation spanning 5 years. Her parents have controlled every aspect of her life: her finances, her housing, her ability to work, even her phone service. This incident at the grocery store wasn't an isolated event. It was the culmination of years of systematic control designed to keep Ms. Reed dependent and compliant. The judge read through everything in silence, her expression giving nothing away. Then she looked up at my parents' attorney. Mr. Thornton, do your clients have any photographic evidence of injuries they sustained from Ms. Reed? No, Your Honor, but the psychological trauma. Any witnesses who saw Ms. Reed initiate physical violence against them? Well, no, but the property damage to their vehicle, which occurred after they had destroyed her property and physically assaulted her in a public place. The judge's tone had shifted from neutral to skeptical. Mr. Thornton, your clients may be upstanding members of the community, but the evidence here suggests they engaged in behavior that meets the legal definition of domestic violence. I'm going to grant the temporary protective order for a period of 2 weeks, at which point we'll have another hearing to determine if it should be extended. My father stood up abruptly, his face flushing red. Your Honor, this is absurd. That's our daughter, our grandson. We have rights. The judge's expression hardened. Sir, sit down or I will hold you in contempt. You have the right to appeal this decision through proper legal channels, but for now, the order stands. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, you are prohibited from contacting Ms. Reed or her son in any way. No phone calls, no texts, no emails, no social media contact, and absolutely no physical proximity. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do you understand? My father looked like he wanted to argue more, but his attorney grabbed his arm and pulled him back down into his seat. My mother simply stared straight ahead, her face a mask of icy fury. Court is adjourned, the judge said, and the gavel came down with a sharp crack that felt like a punctuation mark on my old life. As we left the courtroom, I could feel my parents' eyes burning into my back, but I kept walking. Chloe was right beside me, her presence solid and reassuring. We didn't speak until we were outside the building, standing on the courthouse steps in the bright morning sunlight. You did it, Chloe said. The first and hardest part is done. You have legal protection now. For 2 weeks. For now. And in 2 weeks we'll make it permanent. But Amelia, I need to warn you about something. Your father didn't look like a man who was going to accept this quietly. He's going to fight back, and he's going to do it in ways that we might not expect. You need to be prepared for that. What do you mean? I mean that men like your father, men who are used to having power and control, they don't just give up when they lose in court. They escalate. They find new ways to attack. It might be legal action like filing for custody of Leo. It might be financial like claiming you owe them money for the years they supported you. It might be social like trying to destroy your reputation. We need to be ready for anything. As if on cue, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I turned it on that morning and immediately it had been flooded with messages. But this one was different. It was an email sent from my father's attorney's office with a subject line that made my blood run cold. Petition for emergency grandparent custody. I showed it to Chloe, and she read it quickly, her expression darkening. He didn't waste any time. Can I forward this to myself? Yes, of course. She did, then looked at me seriously. This is exactly what I was talking about. Your father is claiming that you're mentally unstable, financially incompetent, and that you subjected Leo to a dangerous and traumatic situation by dragging him through your breakdown at the grocery store. He's using their wealth, their community standing, and their ability to provide a stable home environment as grounds for why they should have custody of Leo. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Can they actually do that? Can they take Leo? They can try, but they won't succeed. The legal standard for grandparents to get custody over a fit parent is extremely high. They have to prove that you're either unfit or that it would be in Leo's best interest to be removed from your care. We have evidence that you're the one who protected Leo from violence, not exposed him to it. We have the protective order showing that they're the dangerous ones. And we're going to document every step you take to build stability, getting a job, finding housing, everything that proves you're a capable parent who's doing what's best for her child. But I don't have any of those things yet. I don't have a job. I'm living in a homeless shelter. How am I supposed to prove I'm stable when I have nothing? You have more than nothing. You have courage and determination and the protective instinct that made you leave in the first place. Those things matter. And as for the rest, we're going to build it starting today. Come on. Chloe drove me to 3 different places that afternoon. First, a workforce development center where she had connections. She introduced me to a counselor named Maria, who helped me update my rusty resume and printed out copies on nice paper. We highlighted my inventory management experience from years ago, my organizational skills, my reliability. Maria also gave me information about programs that could help with childcare costs and transportation while I was getting back on my feet. You'd be surprised how many employers are willing to give people a chance, Maria said kindly, especially people who are working hard to change their circumstances. Don't give up before you've even started. From there, Chloe took me to a professional clothing donation center, specifically for women entering the workforce. I walked out with 3 interview outfits, a week's worth of business casual clothes, and a pair of sensible shoes that actually fit. The woman who helped me volunteer named Janet had heard my story from Chloe. 20 years ago I was where you are, Janet told me as she folded clothes into a bag. Leaving an abusive marriage with 2 kids and nothing else. I lived in a shelter for 4 months. Now I own my own accounting firm. You're going to make it, honey. It won't be easy, but you're going to make it. The third stop was at a large distribution center on the outskirts of town. Chloe had called ahead talking to someone she knew in management, and they were willing to interview me on the spot for a night shift inventory supervisor position. The manager, a woman in her 40s named Patricia, was all business but not unkind. She asked about my experience, my availability, my ability to lift 50 pounds and stand for long periods. I answered honestly, emphasizing my attention to detail and my willingness to work hard. I didn't mention the shelter or my parents or any of the chaos of my life. I just focused on what I could offer as an employee. Night shift is 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., Sunday through Thursday, Patricia explained. It's not glamorous work. It's scanning inventory, managing shipments, solving problems when things go wrong. But it pays $15 an hour, and after 90 days you qualify for benefits. You interested? $15 an hour, $600 a week before taxes. Not enough to live luxuriously, but enough to start building something. Enough to prove to a judge that I could support Leo. Enough to feel like a functioning adult instead of a dependent child. I'm very interested. When can you start? Tonight if you need me. Patricia smiled slightly. I like your attitude. Let's say Monday. That gives you a few days to arrange childcare and get your affairs in order. Come back Monday at 9:30 for paperwork and orientation. As we drove back to the shelter, I felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. It took me a moment to identify it: hope. Actual real hope that this impossible situation might actually work out. Thank you, I said to Chloe, for everything. I don't know how I'm ever going to repay you for all of this. You're going to repay me by succeeding, by building a good life for yourself and Leo, by being an example to other women who are trapped the way you were. That's payment enough. She glanced at me. But Amelia, I need you to understand something. The work isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning. Your parents are going to fight the custody petition, and they're going to make it ugly. We need to be strategic about every move we make from here on out. What do you mean? I mean that while you're working and building stability, I'm going to be investigating your parents' finances. Something about their story doesn't add up. Your father claims to be a consultant for nonprofits, but the kind of wealth they display suggests income beyond what that would generate. And your mother's charity work, all those boards she sits on, the donations they supposedly manage. I want to look deeper into that. You think they're doing something illegal? I don't know, but I think it's worth examining. If there's anything questionable about their finances, it could be very relevant to the custody case. Courts care about character, and financial crimes would certainly impact how a judge views their fitness as guardians. That evening at the shelter, I helped Leo build his robot, while other women and children moved around us in the common room. Some were watching TV, others were doing homework or talking quietly. The atmosphere was surprisingly peaceful, a shared understanding that everyone here was fighting their own battle and deserved respect and space. Leo was completely absorbed in fitting the tiny pieces together, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration, the way it always did when he was focused. Watching him, I felt a fierce surge of protective love. This was why I'd left. This was why I couldn't go back. Not for the promise of financial security, not for the easier path, not even to avoid the fight that was surely coming. Leo deserved to grow up seeing his mother as strong, not broken, as free, not controlled. Mommy, look, I made the head. Leo held up the partially assembled robot with such pride that several other children came over to admire it. That's amazing, baby. You're so good at this. It's because you got it for me. Even when Grandpa was mean, you still got it for me. One of the other mothers, a woman about my age with 2 daughters, overheard and smiled at me sympathetically. Kids remember the times we protected them. My girls still talk about the day I packed them in the car and drove away from their father. They were scared in the moment, but now they understand. How long have you been here? I asked. 5 months. I'm actually moving into my own apartment next week. I got a job as a receptionist at a dental office, saved up enough for first and last month's rent. It's possible what you're trying to do. Hard, but possible. Her words stayed with me that night as I lay in bed too wired to sleep despite my exhaustion. Hard, but possible. That was becoming my mantra, the thing I repeated to myself when the fear threatened to overwhelm me. The weekend passed in a blur of practical tasks. I enrolled Leo in the childcare program at the shelter, which would cover the hours I'd be at work. I filled out paperwork for food assistance and Medicaid. I practiced the route to my new job, so I'd know exactly how long it would take. I avoided looking at my phone except to check for messages from Chloe because every time I saw the notifications from my parents and Tiffany, my anxiety spiked to unbearable levels. Tiffany's messages had become increasingly aggressive. She'd started a social media campaign posting old family photos with captions about the importance of forgiveness and family unity. She shared articles about parental alienation and the damage children suffer when separated from loving grandparents. She even posted a childhood photo of the two of us, me about 8 and her about 5, with a caption that read, "Missing my sister and praying she finds her way back to the people who love her most. Family isn't perfect, but it's forever." The comments were predictably supportive of Tiffany. "Your poor parents must be heartbroken. Some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. That little boy deserves to know his grandparents." A few people who had known me tried to defend me, suggesting that maybe there was more to the story, but they were quickly shut down or blocked. Chloe advised me not to respond, not to defend myself publicly. Social media fights make everyone look bad, and you can't win against someone who has more followers and a more sympathetic story. Let her talk. Anyone who matters will see through it eventually. Monday came, and with it my first day of work. I dressed in one of the donated outfits, kissed Leo goodbye while he was still sleeping, and drove to the distribution center, with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I was terrified I'd somehow mess this up, say the wrong thing, prove my parents right about my incompetence. But the orientation was straightforward, and the training was clear. The work itself was exactly what Patricia had described: scanning barcodes, tracking inventory, managing the flow of products through the warehouse. It was physical and repetitive, but there was something satisfying about it. Every box I scanned, every shipment I organized was proof that I could do this, that I was capable and reliable and valuable. My trainer was a guy in his early 20s named Marcus, who had started in the same position 2 years ago and worked his way up to shift supervisor. He was patient and encouraging, showing me shortcuts and tricks that made the work easier. "You're picking this up faster than most people," he said around 2 a.m., watching me efficiently process a shipment. "Have you done warehouse work before?" "Not warehouse specifically, but I did inventory management for a small business a long time ago." "It shows. Keep this up and Patricia will probably promote you within a few months. She's always looking for people who actually give a damn." The shift ended at 6 a.m., and I drove back to the shelter as the sun was rising, exhausted but satisfied. Leo was awake eating breakfast with the other children, and when he saw me, his face lit up. "Mommy, you're back. How was work?" "It was good, baby, really good." That became our routine. I'd sleep during the day while Leo was in the childcare program, spend the evening with him, then leave for work after he went to bed. It was exhausting, and there were days I felt like I was running on pure adrenaline and determination. But slowly, steadily, things started to stabilize. 3 weeks into my job, Patricia called me into her office. I went with trepidation, assuming I'd done something wrong, but instead she offered me a raise and a promotion to night shift supervisor. $2 more per hour and actual authority over a team of 5 employees. "You're reliable, you're efficient, and you solve problems instead of creating them," Patricia explained. "Those are rare qualities. Don't waste them." I called Chloe immediately after the shift to tell her. "This is perfect," she said. "Document everything. Keep copies of your pay stubs, your performance reviews, anything that shows you're employed and doing well. We'll need it for the custody hearing." The custody hearing had been scheduled for 6 weeks after my parents filed their petition. 6 weeks for me to prove I was a fit parent, 6 weeks for them to build their case against me, 6 weeks of legal maneuvering and stress and uncertainty. But Chloe had been busy too. She'd been digging into my parents' finances, following paper trails and public records, and what she'd found was damning. "Your father's consulting company is legitimate on the surface," she explained during one of our weekly meetings. "But when you look at where the money actually goes, it gets weird. He's supposedly advising nonprofits on fundraising and efficiency, but several of these nonprofits barely exist. They have websites and tax filings, but no actual charitable work that I can find. And your mother's charities are similar. They take in donations, but the money doesn't seem to go toward any real programs. It all gets paid out to consultants and advisors, most of whom are shell companies. So they're stealing from charities. It looks like money laundering. Donations come in as tax-deductible contributions, get shuffled through various fake organizations, and come out clean on the other side. It's sophisticated enough that it hasn't been caught yet, but it's definitely illegal. What do we do with this information? I have a contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I'm going to present this as a potential case. If they think there's enough evidence to warrant an investigation, they'll take it from there. And if there's an active investigation into your parents when the custody hearing happens, it dramatically changes the dynamics of that hearing. How long will that take? Could be weeks, could be months. Federal investigations move slowly, but I'm hoping we'll at least have confirmation of an active investigation by the time we get to court. While Chloe worked the legal angles, I focused on building the life I wanted. I enrolled in online courses in supply chain management and business administration, studying during Leo's childcare hours. I opened a bank account in only my name, watching the balance slowly grow with each paycheck. I made friends with other women at the shelter, sharing stories and strategies and support. One woman, Angela, became particularly close. She was 35, escaping a 15-year marriage to an abusive husband, and she had a son Marcus's age, who quickly became Leo's best friend. We'd have playdates in the common room, our boys building elaborate structures with blocks and action figures, while Angela and I talked about our plans for the future. I'm enrolling in community college in the fall, Angela told me. Nursing program. It'll take 2 years, but then I'll have a real career, something that pays enough to actually build a life on. That's amazing. I'm so proud of you. Same to you. Look at what you've done in just a month. Job savings, legal representation. You're crushing it. I didn't feel like I was crushing it. Most days I felt like I was barely surviving, running on too little sleep and too much stress. But when I looked at the objective facts, when I measured where I'd been a month ago versus where I was now, I had to admit I'd made progress. Real, measurable progress. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning. Chloe prepared me extensively, running through likely questions, helping me understand what to expect, coaching me on how to stay calm and focused under pressure. Your parents' attorney is going to try to make you look unstable, impulsive, unable to provide for Leo. He's going to bring up your unemployment history, the shelter, the incident at the grocery store. You need to stay calm and answer truthfully, but strategically. Yes, you lived with your parents because you needed support after Leo's father left. Yes, you're currently in a shelter, but it's a temporary solution while you build financial stability. Yes, there was an incident at the grocery store, but you were the victim, not the aggressor. Frame everything as you, taking steps to protect yourself and Leo. What about their finances? The potential investigation. I'm going to bring it up if the opportunity presents itself, but we have to be careful. We don't want to make accusations we can't fully prove. But if I can plant the seed of doubt about their character, it helps our case. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I lay in my shelter bed, staring at the ceiling, running through potential scenarios in my head. What if the judge sided with my parents? What if their wealth and community standing outweighed my fledgling stability? What if I lost Leo? That thought, the possibility of losing my son, sent such a jolt of terror through me that I had to get up and pace the small room to calm myself. No, that wasn't going to happen. I wouldn't let it happen. I'd fought too hard, sacrificed too much to let them take Leo away from me now. The courthouse was even more intimidating the second time, probably because the stakes were so much higher. This wasn't just about a protective order. This was about my right to be a mother to my own child. My parents were already there, dressed impeccably, as always, flanked by their attorney, and looking like the picture of respectable, concerned grandparents. Tiffany was with them too, dressed in a conservative dress that made her look younger and more innocent than she was. When she saw me, she gave me a look of such manufactured sadness that I almost laughed. Almost. The hearing began with my parents' attorney presenting their case. He painted a picture of devoted grandparents who had selflessly supported their troubled daughter for years, only to be repaid with violence and alienation. He presented affidavits from their friends and neighbors, all testifying to what wonderful people the Sterlings were, and how heartbroken they were to be separated from their beloved grandson. He showed photos of Leo at various family events, smiling and happy, as evidence of the strong bond between grandparents and grandchild. Your Honor, my clients are not seeking to permanently remove the child from his mother. They're simply asking for shared custody until Ms. Reed can demonstrate true stability. Right now, she's living in a homeless shelter, working night shifts that leave her son in the care of strangers, and has shown a pattern of impulsive, aggressive behavior. Leo deserves better than uncertainty and chaos. He deserves the stable, loving home that his grandparents can provide. Then it was Chloe's turn, and I watched her demolish their carefully constructed narrative with methodical precision. Your Honor, the Sterlings want this court to believe they're loving grandparents concerned about their grandson's welfare. But the evidence tells a different story. This is a couple who spent 5 years systematically controlling their daughter through financial abuse and emotional manipulation. They monitored her spending, restricted her ability to work, isolated her from potential support systems, and when she finally tried to make an independent decision, they responded with violence. She presented the photos of my injuries again, along with the police report and witness statements. She submitted my employment records showing my consistent attendance and recent promotion. She had letters from my supervisor praising my work performance from the shelter director, noting my responsible parenting and active participation in programs from Angela and other women at the shelter testifying to my character. Ms. Reed isn't living in a homeless shelter because she's irresponsible or unstable. She's living there because she made the incredibly difficult but necessary decision to escape an abusive situation. And rather than collapsing under that pressure, she's thriving. She found employment within days. She's been promoted within weeks. She's actively taking steps to build a stable, independent life for herself and her son. That's not the behavior of an unfit parent. That's the behavior of a devoted mother doing everything in her power to protect her child. Then Chloe dropped the bomb I'd been waiting for. Your Honor, I'd also like to note for the record that my office has submitted information to federal authorities regarding potential financial crimes involving the Sterling's charitable organizations. While that investigation is in its preliminary stages, it raises serious questions about the character and judgment of individuals seeking custody of a minor child. The courtroom erupted. My father stood up shouting that this was a smear campaign, that Chloe was lying, that we were making false accusations out of spite. The judge banged her gavel and threatened to clear the courtroom. My mother sat frozen, her face pale, while Tiffany looked genuinely shocked, apparently not aware of whatever illegal activities our parents had been involved in. When order was restored, the judge looked at my parents with an expression of barely concealed disgust. Mr. Sterling, I'm going to strongly suggest you sit down and let your attorney speak for you. One more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. Their attorney tried to recover, claiming these accusations were unsubstantiated and irrelevant to the custody question, but the damage was done. The judge had seen my father lose control, had heard about a federal investigation, and her entire demeanor had shifted from neutral to skeptical. I'm going to take a 30-minute recess to review all the evidence, she announced. When we return, I'll make my ruling. Those 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. Chloe and I sat in the hallway not speaking, both of us too tense to make small talk. My parents and their attorney were in a different part of the building, probably having an intense conversation about the investigation Chloe had mentioned. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge's expression was unreadable. I've reviewed all the evidence presented today, and I've given careful consideration to the arguments from both sides. This is not an easy decision, as it's clear that both parties love the child in question and believe they're acting in his best interest. However, the law is clear about the rights of biological parents and the high standard required for grandparents to overcome those rights. She looked directly at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, I understand you've provided support to your daughter over the years. But support that comes with control, manipulation, and violence is not the kind of support that benefits a child. The evidence shows that Ms. Reed was not living with you by choice, but because you had systematically eliminated her other options. That is not a loving family dynamic. That is an abusive one. Then she turned to me. Ms. Reed, I'm impressed by the steps you've taken in such a short time. You've found employment, you're pursuing education, you're engaging with support services, and you're clearly devoted to your son's well-being. While your current living situation is not ideal, it's temporary and appropriate given the circumstances you were escaping. She straightened her papers and delivered her ruling. The petition for grandparent custody is denied. Full custody remains with Ms. Reed. Furthermore, given the protective order already in place and the concerning evidence about the Sterling's behavior, I'm extending that protective order for 1 full year. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, you are not to contact your daughter or grandson in any way during that time. If Ms. Reed chooses to allow supervised visitation in the future, that can be arranged through proper legal channels, but that decision is entirely up to her. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and I felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. We'd won. Leo was mine legally and completely, and my parents had no claim on him. As we left the courtroom, I heard my father yelling at his attorney, my mother's voice rising in shrill accusation. But I didn't turn around. I just kept walking Chloe beside me until we were outside in the bright sunshine. You did it, Chloe said, and she was smiling, actually smiling. Full custody, extended protective order, and your parents just showed a judge exactly who they really are. This is as close to a complete victory as you could hope for. What about the FBI investigation? Is that real? It's real. I submitted everything I found and they're taking it seriously. It's going to take time, months probably, but based on what I've seen, I think there's a good chance your parents will face charges. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, victorious. But mostly I just felt tired. Tired and relieved and ready to move forward with my life instead of constantly defending it. Over the next few months, life settled into a new rhythm. I continued working at the distribution center, and Patricia kept giving me more responsibilities. I moved out of the shelter and into a small 2-bedroom apartment with Angela as my roommate, splitting costs and childcare duties. Our boys became best friends, and we became partners in building new lives. Tiffany tried to contact me once, a long email full of apologies and excuses. She claimed she hadn't known about our parents' financial crimes, that she'd been manipulated too, that she wanted to rebuild our relationship. But I remembered her social media posts, the way she'd used Leo as a prop, the casual cruelty of calling me an unfit mother publicly. I wrote back a single sentence. I wish you well, but I don't want a relationship with you. Please respect that and don't contact me again. She sent one more email after that, guilt-tripping and pleading, but I deleted it without reading past the first line and blocked her address. Some bridges once burned should stay that way. The FBI investigation into my parents took almost a year, but eventually it resulted in formal charges. Tax fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, multiple counts that added up to potential decades in prison. Their assets were frozen, their social circle disappeared, and their carefully constructed image of respectability shattered completely. The day the charges were announced, it made local news. I watched the coverage from my living room. Angela beside me as reporters detailed the sophisticated scheme my parents had been running for years. Fake charities, shell companies, stolen donations. All of it laid out for public consumption. How do you feel? Angela asked. I don't know. I thought I'd feel happy or vindicated or something. But mostly I just feel sad. Sad that they chose this sad, that it came to this sad, that Leo will grow up knowing his grandparents are criminals. Leo will grow up knowing his mother had the strength to do the right thing even when it was hard, Angela corrected. That's what matters. My parents eventually took a plea deal to avoid trial. 18 months in minimum security federal prison, substantial fines, and permanent restraining orders. Tiffany's engagement ended, her fiancé citing the scandal as incompatible with his political ambitions. She moved to another state, trying to rebuild her life away from the wreckage. And I built mine right here. I earned my bachelor's degree in supply chain management through online courses, graduated with honors, and used my experience to start my own logistics consulting company. Angela finished nursing school and got a job at a major hospital. Our boys thrived in school best friends who shared everything from toys to dreams about the future. 2 years after that day at the grocery store, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from the U.S. Treasury Department informing me that I was entitled to a whistleblower reward for the information that had led to my parents' conviction. The amount was substantial, $50,000. I stared at that check for a long time, thinking about the path that had led to this moment, about the $35 robot that had sparked everything, about the courage it had taken to walk away, about every difficult decision and painful step that had brought me here. I put half the money into a college fund for Leo. I used part of it to finally buy us a real house, a modest 3-bedroom with a yard and a porch, and I saved the rest as a foundation for growing my business. The day we moved into our house, Leo and I went to Target to shop for new furniture and supplies. We walked past the toy aisle and Leo paused to look at the robotics kits, his eyes scanning the options with the practiced assessment of a kid who'd become an expert on these things. You know, Mommy, he said thoughtfully, I still have that first robot, the one from the grocery store. I've rebuilt it so many times the pieces are kind of worn out, but I'm never getting rid of it. Why's that, baby? Because it reminds me that you chose me, that you picked me and our happiness over being scared. I want to keep it forever, so I remember that. I hugged him right there in the Target toy aisle, not caring who saw or what they thought. This child, this beautiful, thoughtful, brilliant child, understood more about love and courage than most adults ever would. I'll always choose you, I told him. But more importantly, I want you to always choose yourself. When you're older, if you ever find yourself in a situation where people treat you badly, where they try to control you or make you feel small, I want you to remember this story. Remember that walking away from toxicity isn't giving up, it's growing up. I'll remember, he promised. Can we get some new building sets, though? I want to make something really cool for my room. Absolutely, pick whatever you want. We left the store with bags full of robotics kits, craft supplies, and normal everyday things that brought Leo joy. As we loaded everything into my car, a used but reliable SUV that I'd bought myself with money I'd earned myself, I felt that familiar wave of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for that day at the grocery store when everything fell apart and I finally found the courage to leave. Gratitude for Chloe's guidance and expertise. Gratitude for Angela's friendship and partnership. Gratitude for every small step that had led us to this life, this beautiful, peaceful, free life. That evening, I did something I rarely did anymore. I scrolled through old photos on my phone, the ones I'd kept from before we left. Pictures from my parents' house, their elaborate parties, their perfectly staged family gatherings. In every photo, I looked tense, tired, diminished. Leo looked wary, like he was always bracing for something bad to happen. Even in moments that were supposed to be joyful birthday parties and holidays. There was a tension visible in our postures, a wariness in our eyes. Then I looked at recent photos. Leo's first day at his new school, grinning with his backpack. Our housewarming party with Angela Marcus and a handful of other friends we'd collected along the way. Random Tuesday evenings making dinner together in our kitchen. Leo's robotics club competition, where his team had won second place, and he'd been so proud he'd cried happy tears. In every single recent photo, we were both truly smiling, relaxed, happy, alive. The difference was stark, undeniable, almost painful to see laid out so clearly. I started a new album on my phone labeled simply After, and began moving all the photos from the past 2 years into it. This was our real life, the one we'd built from nothing, the one that belonged to us completely. Before bed, I checked my email one last time and found a message from a woman I'd never met. The subject line read, "Thank you for sharing your story. Dear Amelia," it began. "I heard you speak at a conference 6 months ago about financial abuse and leaving toxic family relationships. At the time, I was living with my parents who controlled every aspect of my life. I was 32 years old and felt like a child, monitored and criticized, and kept dependent. Your story gave me the courage to leave. It's been hard, harder than I ever imagined, but I have my own apartment now, a job I chose myself, and for the first time in my adult life, I feel like I'm actually living instead of just surviving. I wanted you to know that by being brave enough to share your story, you helped me find my own courage. Thank you." I read that email 3 times, tears streaming down my face, before I could compose a response. I told her how proud I was of her, how the hardest part was already behind her, how every day would get a little easier and a little better. I shared resources and offered to connect her with Chloe if she needed legal help, and I thanked her for reminding me why it had all been worth it. Because it had been worth it. Every terrifying moment, every uncertain step. Every night I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd made the right choice. It had all been worth it to get here to this life where Leo and I were safe and free and building something real. 3 years after that day at the grocery store, my business had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. I had 8 employees, clients across multiple states, and a reputation for efficiency and reliability that kept bringing in new contracts. I'd been featured in a local business magazine as an example of successful female entrepreneurship, though the article had glossed over the darker parts of my story, focusing instead on my determination to succeed against the odds. Leo was 8 now, thriving in 3rd grade, and still obsessed with building and creating. He joined the school robotics team, made honor roll every semester, and developed a confidence that sometimes took my breath away. He had opinions and interests and friendships that had nothing to do with me, which was exactly how it should be. My parents had been released from prison after serving their time. I'd heard about it through a brief news article, part of a larger story about white-collar criminals re-entering society. According to the article, they'd moved to another state, were working service jobs, and living in a small apartment. The mighty had truly fallen, their wealth and status stripped away, their reputation destroyed beyond repair. I felt nothing when I read about their release. No satisfaction, no sympathy, no curiosity about their lives. They were strangers to me now. People who had once had power over me but no longer did. The restraining order was permanent and unbreakable, and I had no intention of ever reaching out or allowing them back into our lives. Tiffany had tried one last time to contact me, this time through a mutual acquaintance from college. She wanted to meet for coffee to talk about what had happened, to try to repair our relationship. The message emphasized that she'd gone to therapy, that she understood now how toxic our family dynamics had been, that she wanted to apologize and make amends. I thought about it for exactly 3 minutes before declining. Not because I couldn't forgive her, but because I didn't need to. My life was full of people who loved and supported me without conditions. I had Angela, who was more of a sister to me than Tiffany had ever been. I had friends from work and Leo's school and my business network. I had a chosen family built on mutual respect and genuine care, and there was no room in it for people who had proven they would hurt me when it suited them. Tell her I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm not interested in reconnecting, I told the mutual friend. I wish her well in her healing journey, but that journey doesn't need to include me. On Leo's 9th birthday, we had a party at our house that was nothing like the elaborate affairs my parents used to throw. We had pizza from the local place Leo loved, a homemade cake that was slightly lopsided but delicious, and a backyard full of his school friends running around and being loud and messy and perfectly, wonderfully normal. Angela and Marcus were there, of course, along with several other families from school who had become real friends over the years. Chloe came too, bringing an advanced engineering kit that made Leo's eyes go wide with excitement. Patricia from my old warehouse job stopped by with a card and a gift certificate, staying long enough to tell Leo what an amazing mother he had and how proud she was of everything I'd accomplished. As the sun set and the party wound down, Leo and I sat on the porch steps together, watching the last few kids being picked up by their parents. He was holding his new engineering kit, already planning what he'd build first. Mommy, this was the best birthday ever. I'm so glad, baby. You deserve the best. I know this might sound weird, but I'm really glad we left Grandpa and Grandma's house. I know you were scared, but I'm glad you were brave. It wasn't the first time he'd said something like this, but it never failed to make my heart swell with a mixture of pride and relief. Me too, baby, me too. Can I tell you something? Sometimes at school when kids talk about their grandparents, I feel a little sad. Like I'm missing something that other kids have. But then I remember what it was like at their house, how scared I felt sometimes, and I realize I'm not missing anything good. Is that okay? I pulled him close, this wise little person who understood so much more than he should have to. That's more than okay. That's healthy. You're allowed to feel sad about what you didn't get the grandparents you deserved but didn't have. But you're also right that what they offered wasn't actually good. It's okay to mourn the relationship you wish you had, while also being glad you're not in the relationship you actually had. Does that make sense? Yeah, like I wish I had nice grandparents who were actually nice, not just pretend nice. But since I don't, it's better to have no grandparents than mean ones. Exactly. We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, watching fireflies begin to emerge in the growing darkness. Then Leo leaned his head against my shoulder. Mommy, when I grow up, I'm going to be a good parent like you. I'm going to make sure my kids feel safe all the time, and I'm never going to make them scared. You're going to be an amazing parent someday. I said, my voice thick with emotion. And you know how I know that, because you already understand what matters most. Not money or status or what other people think. Just love and safety and letting people be themselves. Yeah, that's the important stuff. 4 years after that day at the grocery store, I was invited to be the keynote speaker at a national conference on domestic violence and family abuse. My story had spread through the advocacy community, and organizations wanted to highlight the often overlooked issue of adult children being abused by parents and the particular challenges of financial abuse and emotional manipulation within families. Standing on that stage in front of hundreds of advocates, social workers, attorneys, and survivors, I talked about the invisible chains that keep people bound to toxic families. I talked about the societal pressure to honor and respect parents no matter how they treat you. I talked about how financial abuse is real abuse, how emotional manipulation leaves scars just as deep as physical violence, how the hardest prison to escape is one built by people who claim they hurt you because they love you. The $35 robot that started my journey to freedom wasn't just a toy, I told the audience. It was a symbol of choice, of agency, of my right to make decisions for myself and my child. When my father destroyed my wallet in that grocery store, he thought he was demonstrating his power over me. But instead, he showed me that I had a choice. I could accept that powerlessness forever, or I could walk away and build my own power. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces, some crying, some nodding in recognition of their own experiences. It wasn't easy. I spent nights in a homeless shelter, worked exhausting overnight shifts, lived on anxiety and determination for months. There were moments I doubted myself, moments I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. But every single struggle was worth it because now my son and I are free. We're building a life that belongs to us, not to the people who claimed ownership of us. We're proving every day that you don't need money or status or the approval of toxic people to have a good life. You just need courage and the willingness to believe you deserve better. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Afterward, I was approached by dozens of people sharing their own stories, thanking me for giving voice to experiences they thought were unique to them. A literary agent asked if I'd consider writing a book. A filmmaker wanted to document my story as part of a series on financial abuse. A university professor asked if I'd be willing to guest lecture for her psychology classes. But the moment that mattered most came from a young woman, probably 19 or 20, who waited until everyone else had gone. "I'm living with my parents," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "They control everything, my money, my car, my school choices, who I date. Everyone tells me I'm lucky to have parents who care so much, but it doesn't feel like caring. It feels like drowning. Your story." It made me realize that what I'm experiencing has a name. It's abuse, and I don't have to accept it just because they're my parents. I took both her hands in mine and looked directly into her frightened eyes. "You're absolutely right. It is abuse, and you don't have to accept it. It's going to be scary to leave, and it's going to be hard, but you can do it. And when you do, when you finally breathe that first breath of free air, you'll understand that everything you went through to get there was worth it." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and I gave her Chloe's contact information along with resources for other attorneys and support services. I also gave her my business card and wrote my personal email on the back. If you need someone to talk to someone who's been exactly where you are, reach out anytime. You're not alone. You're never alone. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I received an email from that young woman. "I called the attorney you recommended. I have an appointment next week. I'm terrified, but I'm doing it. Thank you for showing me it's possible." I saved that email in a folder labeled "Why It Matters," along with dozens of others I'd received over the years from people my story had helped. On the hardest days when I was tired or stressed or doubting myself, I'd read through those messages and remember that my pain had purpose, that by surviving and thriving and sharing my experience, I was helping others find their own paths to freedom. Leo was 11 now, in 6th grade, and showing clear signs of the person he was becoming. He was kind, confident, creative, and completely comfortable in his own skin. He had a strong sense of justice and fairness, probably born from witnessing injustice so young. He stood up for kids who were bullied at school. He questioned authority when it didn't make sense. He thought deeply about ethics and morality in ways that sometimes surprised me with their sophistication. "Mom," he said one evening while we were making dinner together, "my friend Jake was talking about his grandparents today, and I realized I don't really remember yours very well. Like, I remember being scared sometimes, but I don't remember specific things. Is that normal?" I paused in chopping vegetables, considering how to answer. Leo was old enough now to understand more of the truth, but I still wanted to protect him from the worst of it. "It's completely normal," I said. "You were very young, and sometimes our brains protect us by not holding on to memories that were scary or painful. What do you remember?" "Just feelings mostly. I remember feeling like I had to be really quiet and good all the time. And I remember the grocery store the day we left. I remember you buying me the robot even though Grandpa was mad, and then we drove away and never went back." "That's right, we drove away and never went back." "Do you ever regret it? Like, was it hard being on your own?" "It was incredibly hard," I answered honestly, "some of the hardest months of my life. But I've never regretted it, not even for a second. Because staying would have been harder in a different way. It would have meant teaching you that it's okay for people to treat you badly, that you should accept control and criticism in exchange for financial security. I couldn't do that to you. You deserved better, and the only way to give you better was to leave." Leo nodded thoughtfully, then went back to setting the table. A few minutes later, he spoke again. "I'm glad you left. I like our life. It's not fancy or anything, but it's good. It's ours." "It's ours," I agreed. "That's exactly right." That night, after Leo was asleep, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I pulled out the original robot, the one from that fateful day at the grocery store. Leo had kept it in a special box in his closet, the pieces worn from countless rebuilds, some of them held together with careful glue jobs from when they'd broken. It wasn't functional anymore, not really, but it was precious in a way that had nothing to do with its monetary value. I held it in my hands, this $35 toy that had cost me everything and given me everything, and I thought about the woman I'd been 5 years ago. Scared, controlled, convinced I was worthless without my parents' support. I thought about the moment in that grocery store when I decided to buy it anyway, knowing it would cause a scene but unable to deny Leo one more time. That decision, that tiny act of defiance, had been the first domino in a chain reaction that had completely transformed our lives. I wondered sometimes what would have happened if I hadn't bought the robot. If I'd put it back on the shelf, apologized to my father, swallowed my shame, and continued living under their control. Would I have eventually found the courage to leave anyway? Or would I still be there teaching Leo? Through my submission that this was just how life worked, how families operated, how love looked, I'd never know, and I was grateful for that. Grateful that I'd made the choice I made, taken the risk I took, found the courage that changed everything. The next morning I woke up to find an email from Chloe with the subject line, "Thought you'd want to see this." Attached was a news article about my father. He'd been arrested again this time for attempting to run a similar fraud scheme in his new state. Apparently he hadn't learned his lesson, or more likely he simply couldn't stop himself. He was addicted to the manipulation, the control, the feeling of getting away with something. The article mentioned his previous conviction and noted that this second offense would likely result in a much longer sentence. There was a quote from a federal prosecutor calling him a repeat offender who shows no remorse and no capacity for rehabilitation. I read the article twice, trying to identify what I felt about it. There was no satisfaction in seeing my father arrested again. No vindication or triumph. Just a weary sort of sadness that he'd chosen this path that he couldn't or wouldn't change, that he'd die someday having accomplished nothing but causing pain to the people around him. I replied to Chloe with a simple, "Thanks for letting me know. I feel mostly sad about it." Her response came quickly. "That's a healthy response. It means you've healed. You don't need his suffering to validate your freedom." She was right. I'd built a good life, a peaceful life, a life that had nothing to do with my parents or their fate. Their choices were their own, and their consequences were deserved, but none of it touched me anymore. I was free of them finally and completely. That weekend, Leo and I went back to Target, a tradition we'd developed over the years. We'd walk through the toy aisles, not always buying anything, just looking at what was new and talking about what interested him. It was our time together, unhurried and pressure-free. As we walked past the robotics section, Leo paused at a display of advanced kits designed for teenagers. "Mom, when I'm older, I want to study robotics engineering in college. Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay. It's more than okay. You can study whatever you want, be whatever you want. That's the whole point. The whole point of everything. Of leaving, of building this life, of working so hard to give us freedom. So you could grow up knowing that your choices are your own. That you're not limited by what other people think you should do or be. You get to decide." Leo looked at me with those thoughtful brown eyes, and I saw understanding dawn. He got it. He understood what I'd sacrificed, and why what we'd gained, and what it meant. "Thank you," he said simply, "for choosing me." "Always," I replied. "I will always choose you. But more importantly, I want you to always choose yourself." We left the store with a new engineering kit. Not because Leo needed it, but because I wanted to. I wanted to mark this moment, this realization that we'd made it. We'd survived and thrived and built something beautiful from the wreckage of what we'd escaped. As we drove home past familiar streets in a neighborhood where we belonged, where we had friends and community, and a real life, I thought about that young woman at the conference who'd told me she was finally leaving her controlling parents. I thought about all the emails in my Why It Matters folder. I thought about Leo beside me, confident and creative and free. And I thought about the woman I used to be standing in that grocery store checkout line, trembling as I reached for my wallet, terrified of the consequences, but buying the robot anyway. That woman had been so scared, so beaten down, so convinced she was worthless. But she'd also been brave, braver than she knew, brave enough to take one small step that would lead to 1,000 more. I wished I could go back and tell her that it would all work out, that the fear was temporary, but the freedom would be permanent, that her son would thrive and she would too, that the $35 she was about to spend wasn't just for a toy. It was the down payment on a whole new life. But I couldn't go back, and that was okay, because I was here now in this present that I'd fought so hard to create, and it was everything I'd hoped for and more. That night I took a photo of Leo sleeping peacefully in his bed, surrounded by his robots and his books and his artwork in his room, in our house, in our life. I didn't post it online. I just saved it to my phone, a reminder for myself on the hard days that might still come. The caption I wrote just for me said everything. This is what freedom looks like. This is what choosing yourself creates. This is what love, real love, builds. Worth every sacrifice. Worth every struggle. Worth everything. And it truly was.